we go and have a look at some of the most successful self-published authors out there, they are releasing new books every 6 months and sometimes even every 2 weeks. How are we supposed to do that? Hey guys, it's Deborah here, and today we are going to go through the 3 keys for more frequent publishing. And there will be flowcharts. The first key is your process. What does the full process for publishing a book look like? You start with a book, which you outline and research until you feel comfortable writing your first draft. From this first draft, you'll give it to some alpha readers or a developmental editor who's going to look at the high-level structure and focus of your book and give you some feedback on it. After your alpha revisions, you'll usually take it to a group of beta readers or content and line editors so that you can get some more detailed feedback on your book and what's working and what's not working. If you're doing something like a cookbook, a children's picture book, something with a lot of interior art, as some fantasy novels might do, then you're going to need to get the illustrator and artists on board. That means doing things like a storyboard and concept art before they can start the process of doing all of the interior art. You then get into typesetting and formatting your book in each of the different formats. After your book has been formatted, you may want to send it out to an additional test audience, so gamma readers, for example, and you'll usually want to have your book copy edited. Your book needs to have a good cover and a blurb, so it's time to get the cover designer involved. Then you'll have a close to final product which you can send out as an advanced review copy in order to get reviews and to promote your book. The final stage before publication is proofing, where you go through and check that you haven't missed any typos, errors, misprints, pages missing, chapters out of order, things like that, to make sure that your audience is going to get a good quality product when they buy your book. After all of that, it's time to hit publish and then get on to marketing. That is what the publishing process in full looks like if we are doing everything as a simple sequential process. Don't worry if some of these steps aren't familiar to you. I'll be doing separate videos that go through each of them and explain how it all works. There are some authors who do even more than this, and there are a lot of authors who do way less than this. This process is very, very long. Therefore, the first key to more frequent releases is to cut out unnecessary steps in your process, to make sure you are only doing the steps that are necessary in order to produce your minimum viable product. If you don't know what an MVP is, make sure you check out my other video on the topic. We're going to assume that each step in your process takes the same amount of time to perform for now. If we get rid of the illustrations, suddenly the process is a lot shorter. You can simplify this even further. Let's say you're a very experienced storyteller. What you might say is, well, I don't really see the need of having an alpha read or getting a developmental editor involved. You might choose to go straight to a beta read after your first draft and a content or line edit. You'll get some revisions done, you'll skip the gamma reads entirely, you'll get into your cover and your design, proofing, publishing. This process is now even shorter. If you need to have a really high frequency book release schedule, you might strip it right back to the basic process where you have your idea, you pants out a first draft, you go through and you do a self-edit, you typeset, get your cover, blurb, hit publish, and then go straight to marketing your book. You could still cut this basic process down even further. Have an idea for a book? Pump out a first draft, throw in a cover and a blurb, hit publish. Done. There are heaps of other videos on YouTube debating the pros and cons of each step within the full process and whether it's worth it and all of that. And honestly, my view is it depends on what your book is, what your MVP is, and who you are as an author. All of our processes are going to be different because we're different people and we're publishing different books. The important takeaway here is if you're self-publishing as the publisher, then you get to decide what is necessary and what is not necessary. It's all quite abstract with those generic examples on the screen, so let me take you through how I structured my process for my first book. This is what I did as somebody publishing a bilingual picture book in Cantonese for ages 2 to 6 and not actually being able to read or write Chinese myself. I needed to have alpha reads in there for the Chinese text. I wanted to have beta reads to see whether the book was landing with my audience. My audience generally finds bilingual books by asking for recommendations from people they trust, so I thought advanced review copies would be important to marketing and promoting my book. Deciding what steps to include in your process is a pretty big decision because if you get it wrong, then there are going to be consequences. None of those things are good, but I think the worst thing that could happen is bad reviews. And I don't mean bad reviews where somebody just doesn't like your book because your book is not for them, they are not in your target audience. I'm talking about bad reviews where your actual target audience hates the book. That does not bode well for your future sales. A really good example in the world of self-publishing that I want to talk about is Will White. He's best known as the author of the Cradle series. Uncrowned was a really highly anticipated book. When it came out, fans were really divided on how the book ended. I personally thought it was fantastic, but a lot of fans also hated it because they felt like it didn't deliver on their expectations in terms of the MVP. And there were a lot of negative comments floating around the fandom. The main thing you should take away from this example is fans can be super passionate, which is fabulous because they will buy everything that you put out. I buy everything that Brandon Sanderson and Will White puts out, but it's a double-edged sword. If that was helpful, don't forget to hit the like button. Now let's talk about the second key, dependencies. Once you've worked out which steps you're going to include in your publishing process, you need to go through and work out which ones have dependencies and where those dependencies sit. Dependencies exist when one step can only be performed after some other step has been completed. For example, it would not make any sense to do some revisions before you've even written the first draft because you actually have nothing to revise. But what about marketing? Do you really need to wait until you've published the book in order to market it? No. So what we could actually do is run it in parallel as we're doing the book. The takeaway here is you should always try to run independent steps in parallel whenever possible. My book was about birthday, so it didn't need extensive outlining or research. So I just pumped out the first draft, and as soon as that first draft was done, I sent it off to my alpha readers. It was not going to change how the illustrations were going to go, so I got straight onto doing my storyboard, and then I got straight into my interior art. If you're doing genre fiction and you want to include like a map or something, your beta reads may not have a dependency on your interior art. In my case, it did because my target audience was kids. It's a kids picture book, so I definitely had a dependency there. Once my book was with my beta readers, I could do a whole bunch of other things that I didn't need necessarily to wait for their feedback. So I went ahead and I typeset and format my book. I then did my cover and wrote my blurb, and I started reaching out to people to see if they would be interested in getting advanced reviewed copies. I actually went straight through to proofing without waiting on revisions from my ARCs or my beta reads. In hindsight, I'm not really sure that was the most efficient way to do things. I mainly got proofs because I wanted to see what the print quality was actually like, and I was happy to rely on just getting an e-proof for any final revisions. After my physical proofs, I put through all of my revisions from my beta reader feedback, as well as a late error that one of my advanced reviewers found in my book on release day, which was just fabulous. Looking at this diagram on screen, you'd think I was really organized and just put through one round of revisions in terms of proofing. Unfortunately, that's not how it actually played out. But the intent of doing revisions once and just doing the proofs once was certainly the case. The other thing I tried really hard to do was to get my marketing going before I actually hit publish on my book, just because I knew I needed time to build an audience and to build traction. The third key is throughput. What the hell is throughput? Throughput is all about your productivity or your bandwidth or your capacity in terms of getting steps in your process done. So really, we're talking about how long any of these particular steps take. Your throughput on any given step is going to be a function of your skills, experience, and available time. You've got three main ways of improving throughput. And in any given project, there are two types of time that you are referring to. One is the actual number of hours that a particular task or step takes to perform, and the other is in terms of your overall project timeline, calendar days. If I increase the number of hours a week I could devote to self-publishing, I can do more of the steps within the same calendar week. But there is a limit to how many additional hours I can physically throw at the project. The second way, in particular, if you're doing a lot of DIY, is to just get better at doing each of the things. If you have a low level of skill in writing prose, in research, in illustration, in editing, in revision, then it's going to take you a lot longer to do the same amount of work than it will for somebody who is more experienced in that area. The third way you can improve your throughput is to simply outsource that particular step. When you outsource something, you free up your available time to work on another part of the process. There's going to be trade-offs in terms of the skills and experience that you're getting, as well as in terms of the cash outlay that you're putting into the project. But it is a very valid option if you're having trouble condensing your publishing timeline to the release frequency that you need to hit. The key to improving throughput is not just to try and reduce the amount of time every single step takes. I mean, that does work because you are decreasing the total amount of time that your whole process takes when you add up all the time in all of the steps, but it is not the most efficient way to do it. What you need to be focusing on is improving the throughput around your bottlenecks. So if I can improve step 1 from taking 1 week to only 3 days, then I have shortened the time frame for my overall process by a whole 4 days. And I'm going to feel that much more than if I went through and tried to optimize steps 2 through to 5, because you can see that step 4 has a dependency on step 2. Step 5 is dependent on step 3. So I have 2 chains of dependencies here where if I want to shorten the overall time frame, I need to be shortening the time frame on the chains overall. I had 2 major bottlenecks: interior art and proofing. It took less than a week to get to the point where I was ready to do my interior art. Once I had my interior art done, I could get books out to my beta readers. While my betas were doing the beta reads, I could move on to doing my cover and blurb and doing my typesetting as well. Once I had a cover and blurb ready, I was ready to go with my advanced review copies. And while they were off doing that, I went ahead and got some proofs. And beyond paying for express shipping, there wasn't a lot that I could do to try and get those proofs earlier. Once I had my proofs though, and I was happy with them, that meant I was ready to go with publishing. Meanwhile, I've been doing all of this marketing alongside, and it just took way more time than I thought it would. And I should have started way earlier. I kind of have regrets about it, but at the time I was still so caught up in figuring out illustration and book formatting and all that stuff that honestly, the marketing itself just kind of fell behind in terms of my priorities. I do wonder though, if I had started doing that, whether it would have actually distracted me from getting the book done. Since we're all different people publishing different things, everybody's process is going to be a little bit different. I think it's really good to take a look at what other authors in your niche are doing so you can try out different ideas for your process and see if it works for you. The next time you're about to start working on a new book, think about these 3 keys. Number 1, eliminate any unnecessary steps in your process. And remember that you are the judge of what's necessary and what's not. Number 2, know where all of your dependencies are and try to run independent steps in parallel wherever possible. Try and make your chains of dependencies as short as possible. 3, focus on improving your throughput around your bottlenecks, because the more you do that, the more you can condense that overall publishing timeline and get books out more frequently. And bonus tip number 4, never compromise on your MPV, because as an author, you have an obligation to your readers to deliver on your promises to them. That's it for this video. If you found it helpful, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this on the business side of self-publishing. If you want to see me do a particular video on something, just let me know in the comments.